Hey everyone, welcome to Stories. Today we're going to dive deep into the greatest legend of music history, Mozart. But not the usual wig-wearing, polite Mozart, you know. Today we are talking about that real, dysfunctional guy who spoke slang, was constantly drowning in debt, got bored of palace small talk and used toilet humor, and pulled off weird stunts during his concerts. The scandals, hidden illnesses, and that tragic end that history books don't tell you about. If you're ready, let's begin. When Mozart was born in 1756, he wasn't just a child to his father Leopold. He was a walking bank account. Leopold was a court violinist and musician. He built a kind of circus to turn the fame he couldn't achieve himself into money through Mozart. While Leopold was giving lessons to his daughter Nannerl, he noticed 3-year-old Wolfgang Mozart watching the lessons from the side. When Mozart sat down at the piano, his father Leopold was shocked. But Leopold didn't just say, "Good job, son." He drove him around Europe's palaces on grueling days-long journeys, making him perform without rest. Mozart's famous genius blossomed and flourished inside this prison of discipline built by his father. So, behind that musical genius was an ambitious and manipulative father who had stolen his childhood. Now, let's talk about his concerts. Today, when we say a concert, we picture a quiet, neatly listened to environment, right? Back in Mozart's time, it was an absolute circus. When Mozart took the stage, sometimes he kept his composure, and other times he totally lost it. He was unbelievably hyperactive. While playing the violin, he would dance, pull funny faces at the piano, and sometimes suddenly start making nonsense jokes. It is said that once, during a concert, he jumped on top of an empty table and meowed. We are talking about a guy who was constantly in motion, unable to stay still, behaving as if there were thousands of volts of electricity running through him. The audience was both mesmerized by his music and eagerly waiting for this mad genius's next move. Those who think Mozart was just a musician are wrong. In fact, he struggled with serious health issues throughout his life. Today, modern medicine believes he had Tourette's syndrome. Why? Constantly repeating involuntary movements, arm and hand tics, and dropping profanity-laced jokes in the middle of aristocratic settings out of nowhere. That's why he was constantly viewed as a tactless, loose cannon in high society circles. Furthermore, the countless illnesses he suffered in his childhood completely destroyed his immune system for life. That pale face, exhausted demeanor, and those endless coughing fits were actually SOS signals sent by his body. Let's move on to the most sensational and heartbreaking part. Money. Mozart earned unbelievable amounts of money from palaces and concerts, according to the standards of his time. In other words, the sums falling into his hands were at a level we could call a fortune today. But the problem was that, together with his wife Constance, they lived such an extravagant, high-rolling lifestyle that the money practically evaporated in their hands. Enormous apartments in Vienna's most expensive neighborhoods, the most luxurious clothes, high-fashion wigs that never left their heads, and massive parties where people were constantly coming and going. And the real black hole was the gambling tables and gambling addiction. Mozart was an hardcore gambler who wouldn't leave the billiards tables and card games. He would blow tons of money he won in a single night at the roulette table or on billiards bets. So much so that even when he ran out of money, he didn't stop. He took on loan after loan from Vienna's loan sharks and Masonic friends. When you look at the letters he wrote during his final years, you see that proud genius gone, replaced by a pathetic man begging, "Please lend me some money, otherwise I'm ruined." The world's greatest musical genius had sunk into a pit of misery, fleeing from creditors with mountains of debt piled behind him. And let's come to the most spine-chilling part, that famous rivalry, Antonio Salieri. Salieri was the most authorized official composer of Vienna, the capital of the Habsburg Empire at that time, meaning the court music director. He was the darling of kings and nobles, an extremely influential, disciplined, and master musician. However, according to rumors that went from mouth to mouth in the streets of Vienna back then, Salieri was mortally jealous of young Mozart's improvisational genius. According to the legend, Salieri used his power at the court to block Mozart's work, and eventually even poisoned him sneakily. Even though historians have proven time and time again that this was a completely baseless rumor, This dark tale never faded in the eyes of the Vienna public. In fact, the rumors that Mozart muttered, "Someone poisoned me, I can't help feeling it" on his deathbed, carried this conspiracy theory right down to the present day. But the truly tense part starts right after. Toward the end of 1791, while Mozart is lying sick in bed, his knock rings out. Standing before him is a mysterious stranger dressed entirely in gray, whose face is barely visible. This man commissions a requiem, a funeral mass, from Mozart on the condition that his identity remains secret, and leaves a hefty deposit. Mozart, already struggling to stay upright with a worn-out body and various illnesses, completely shatters psychologically when he takes on this mysterious commission. While frantically writing those notes amidst high fevers, he begins to believe that the Gray Man is actually the Grim Reaper, and that he is writing his own death march. And the worst happens. Before he can finish that magnificent requiem, he passes away at just 35 years old. But the scandal after his death is even bigger. His family, drowning in debt, lacks even the money to give him a dignified burial. The great genius's funeral is sent to a crowded mass grave reserved for ordinary and destitute people. He is so neglected that a few years later, when the cemetery is reorganized, it becomes impossible to tell where his bones are, and the exact spot is completely lost. Mozart brought heaven down to earth with his notes, but ended his own life in an absolute hell. So, do you think court maestro Salieri really poisoned him out of jealousy? Or did Mozart become the victim of his own genius and wild lifestyle? Let's meet in the comments. See you in the next story. Stay tuned.